There is so much depth and lore to the Pokemon franchise that sometimes even the simplest of things can go over someone's head, whether it be something you used to think as a kid and turned out to be completely false, or something that you might still believe and only recently or are about to find that that thing wasn't what you thought. It's been a while since I did a video on misconceptions in the Pokemon franchise, so here's part 2. Some of the things on this list may be obvious, and some not so much. Either way, I hope you find at least one thing on this list somewhat surprising. Or if not, interesting, I guess. The Gala region is the UK flipped upside down. So we all know by now that Gala is indeed based on the UK, and looking at the Gala region, it sure does look like the UK that's been turned 180 degrees, but that really isn't the case. Thing to note about Pokemon regions being based on real places, they don't exactly copy the place they're based on. They more take parts of the original area and scatter them around to make something unique. Kalos, for example, isn't the same as France, and the same goes for Gala in the UK. If you want a good idea of what parts of the UK are likely to be featured within the Gala region, Duncan Can't Die, or Duncan Knee Deep, has done a great video over which parts of the UK are most likely going to be in Gala, which will be in the description. So, just remember, a region being based on a real life country doesn't mean it's going to mimic that country or area exactly. It's impossible to shiny hunt in Generation 1. Now it is true that shiny Pokemon didn't exist in the first generation, but that doesn't mean that you couldn't hunt for shinies still. So there are only specific Pokemon you're able to shiny hunt in the Gen 1 games, as a shiny in Gen 1 is determined by the Pokemon's stats. Because of this, the legendaries in the game are for the most part the only Pokemon you're able to shiny hunt. If you get the correct individual numbers for the Pokemon stats, and they all match up, all you have to do is transfer the Pokemon from Gen 1 to a Gen 2 game, and since shinies in Gen 2 are also determined by the Pokemon stats, if the stats line up correctly, you'll have yourself a shiny Pokemon, making Gen 1 shinies some of the rarer shiny Pokemon to find. So, if you're up for a shiny hunting challenge, try shiny hunting in Pokemon Red, Blue or Yellow. Pokemon origin misconceptions. Some Pokemon have origins that are pretty obvious, some Pokemon have origins that are not so obvious, and some Pokemon have origins that might seem somewhat obvious, but turn out it's not quite what you think. For example, Zigzagoon may seem like it's a raccoon, but it's more likely based on a Japanese raccoon dog, also known as a tanuki. I've heard some people think that Shuckle is based on a turtle or tortoise, when in actuality it's more likely based on an endolith, an organism that lives inside a shell or rock. And my personal favourite is Tangela. Some people tend to think that Tangela is based on vines or even a mop. Well, it turns out that Tangela is most likely based on Medusa. You know, the person with snakes in her hair and who can turn people to stone just by looking at them. Yeah, that's a pretty cool origin. Although not gonna lie, if I was told there was a Pokemon based on Medusa and they showed me this, I would probably be very disappointed. It's also likely based on the Green Man, a face that's covered in leaves, which honestly seems more likely than Medusa, but let's be honest, nowhere near as cool. Pokemon type misconceptions. So a good example of what I mean by this is thinking that Bug is weak to poison, which is something that I used to think in the past, but of course isn't the case anymore, as poison is not super effective against Bug. Some other examples are people thinking that Rock either resists or is even immune to electric, Ghost being weak to Psychic, and I've even heard of people thinking that Fairy was weak to Fire. Fairy is of course not weak to Fire, Fire just so happens to resist Fairy. As for the other type matchup misconceptions, we mainly have Gen 1 to blame for this one, as back then, Bug was indeed weak to Poison, and since most Rock types were also Ground types, and the Ghost types were Poison types, Rock being unaffected by Electric, and Ghost being weak to Psychic made sense. That of course isn't the case, and these matchups are a bit more balanced than before. Hoot Hoot only has one leg. This is something that I believed until quite recently. Almost every image of Hoot Hoot only shows it revealing one of its legs, but it turns out that it does in fact have a second leg, that it just likes hiding all the time. This is much easier to see in the cards and anime, but its second leg is definitely there. As for some other Pokemon design misconceptions that I've heard about, there's one where people think that Cradilly's eyes are here, when they're actually here. One that I didn't know about until recently was with Staryu. I didn't realise that the gold part in Staryu actually went around part of its body. Apparently it was quite obvious to some people, but definitely not for me. People thinking that a Pokemon is a pseudo-legendary when it isn't. I feel like this is a misconception that shouldn't be a misconception anymore, but for some reason still is. Believe it or not, I still see people thinking that Pokemon like Lucario, Zoroark, Haxorus, and Silvally are pseudo-legendaries. As much as I would have loved Lucario to have been a pseudo-legendary, that's definitely not the case. Here is what determines a pseudo-legendary. If the Pokemon's base stat total is equal to 600, and they're already not a legendary, mythical, mega, etc., they are a pseudo-legendary. Since Pokemon like Lucario don't have a 600 base stat total, they are not a pseudo-legendary. Silvally, however, is a slightly different case, as it is already a legendary without the pseudo part, and so is Type Null for some reason. That you can probably count as its own misconception, since I'm pretty certain not everyone knows about that one. This Charizard card is the most valuable Pokemon trading card. This is without question the most famous expensive Pokemon card, maybe even the most famous expensive trading card ever. However, it is not the most valuable. A perfectly graded holographic Charizard goes for around $50,000. But the title of the most expensive Pokemon trading card actually goes to the Illustrator Pikachu card. One of the reasons for this card being so expensive is because it was only given out as a reward to the winners of an art contest held in Japan in 1998, making it extremely rare, at around maybe 30 copies worldwide. A PSA Grade 9 Illustrator Pikachu can go for double the amount of a Charizard card, going for as much as $100,000. Why someone would want to spend that much on a card, I don't know. This easily makes the Illustrator Pikachu card one of the most valuable trading cards ever, although definitely not the most valuable trading card, as if we go outside of Pokemon, the most valuable trading card that I've come across is actually a baseball card that goes for around roughly... That's fucking ridiculous, what the fuck? So, do you remember this trainer in Pokemon Red and Blue? This is the Cue Ball trainer. Tell me, did you ever think there was anything off about the sprite? Anything around this area maybe? To you, what does this look like? As a kid, and even as an adult, I was so confused as to what it was, as it didn't exactly look like something appropriate. I've heard some people think it's a cup, a fanny pack, a certain body part, but it turns out that this is actually a belt buckle. A fucking belt buckle. My life has been a lie for so long. And luckily, I wasn't alone either. Pokemon is pronounced Pokemon.
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 Pokeyman.
Pokemon.
Even though this technically isn't the quote-unquote correct way to pronounce the franchise name, it still makes sense why people would say it that way. Pokemon, or Pokémon, are much more natural sounding than the correct pronunciation, which by the way is actually supposed to be pronounced Pokémon. The accented E, which is more commonly used in French words, makes more of an A sound, like in the word cafe for example. Now I'm never going to complain about someone pronouncing Pokemon as Pokemon or Pokémon. It's much less irritating than actual bad Pokemon name pronunciations like Lugia, Natu, and Chimecho. Yeah, Chimecho. And the 10th misconception about Pokemon is... Danny DeVito has nothing to do with the Detective Pikachu movie. I don't actually know if he's going to be part of the film or not. I just saw that the official Detective Pikachu Twitter followed him and thought it was kind of interesting. Pokemon main series game remakes belong to the generation that they're based on.
It's false. No way. No. It's totally made up. Pure fiction. It's fiction. It's fiction. It's a made-up tale. It's a total fabrication. It never happened. It never happened. This one was invented by a writer. It's false. It never happened. It's a fake. It's fiction. It's an urban legend that never happened. Not a chance. You're wrong. Not this time. It never happened.
If you believe that Heartgold and Soul Silver are Generation 2 games, you are wrong. This isn't even a, well, it's my opinion scenario. No, you are actually wrong. Fire Red and Leaf Green are Gen 3, Heartgold and Soul Silver are Gen 4, Oras is Gen 6, and Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee are Gen 7. That is a fact. Now, some people like to argue that this isn't the case, and being released in a certain generation doesn't dictate what gen the games belong to. Well, newsflash, that is pretty much exactly how it works. Remakes belong to the generation they were released in, and that is fact. That's pretty much how a generation works. The region does not equal the generation. The game it's based on does not equal the generation. Whatever generation it is when the game comes out is the generation it belongs to. Pokemon Heart Gold does not belong in the same generation as Pokemon Gold, just the same as the Lion King remake will not belong in the same generation as the 1994 classic. Put it this way, a generation acts kind of like a time frame. Any new game that comes out in this time frame, or generation, belongs to that generation. If the next main series games after Sword and Shield are Diamond and Pearl remakes, for example, they will be Generation 8 games, not Generation 4 games. Now, apologies if this rant was a bit longer than expected. It's just something that's been bugging me for a while, since I've seen a lot of people saying that Gen 2 is their favourite gen because their favourite Pokemon game is Soul Silver. If you think that I'm wrong about this, and still think that a remake belongs to the generation of the games that it's based on, well, I'm not wrong. You're wrong. Just don't go dissing a Pokemon generation when it turns out your favourite game in the franchise actually belongs to that exact generation. And those are 10 more somewhat interesting misconceptions about the Pokemon franchise that hopefully won't be misconceptions for longer. If you haven't seen my first video on Pokemon misconceptions and would like to see 10 more, then please do check out the first video. Overall, if you managed to learn at least one thing from this video, then I'll consider my job done. Please leave a like if you enjoyed, subscribe for more videos in the future, and until next time, thanks so much for watching.